joining another session here in the Fields Community of Practice. For those of you who are new to the group and or haven't joined us before, just a reminder that you make sure your audio is muted so that we don't pick up any sidebar conversation you weren't intending. And then go ahead and shut your videos off in case we don't want to see what else is going on in your background until you are speaking or presenting. We've had a little bit of that on various Teams environments, but we're all getting schooled up. And then I also put in here, and Kim just kind of briefly went through it, if you're missing the documents and you'd like to follow along with today's discussion, they are in the webinar document folder at the bottom of the Fields Community Practice website or set SharePoint, so that you can follow along and or follow up. With that, I'm going to turn this transcript off real quick. So what we've got going today is we have Kim Ernstrom from the Iftds team who've been working hard to get the needs of the field served, and they are finally getting around to the burn plan module being available and or ready, if I'm not misspeaking, for the field use. And so welcome, Kim, for joining us, and we look forward to your presentation.
Cool. Thanks, Jen. Yeah, it's great to be here, and we are pretty excited about showing you guys some of these things. We released our, the main thing I'm going to kind of focus on today is our compare, we call it our compare weather feature, and I think it's one that's really great for prescription writing. But there's some other stuff in Iftds I'm going to show you also. And I guess the thing to keep in mind is I'm not going to do a bunch of introduction to Iftds. I'm kind of going to just dive right in. So I'm going to point out a few things that'll help if you've not used Iftds, places you can go learn kind of from the intro level and see how the whole application works. But I'm going to kind of jump right into the pieces that fit with the burn plan stuff. So if you want to throw some questions or anything in the chat, feel free to do that. Josh just tossed a link to Iftds, the actual Iftds application in the chat there for you. And like I said, we've got all those things posted in the SharePoint site. So if you want to grab any of those files, feel free, or later on, they'll stay there. Also, I have Bree Schuler, Caroline Noble, and Josh Hyde and Nicole Vaillant are on the call also, sort of as the peanut gallery today. But all of us comprise the Iftds team. And Caroline, of course, did the presentation last week on the FTEM system. So, and then Josh Hyde is our primary help desk and user support. And Josh has created most of the help content that you find in the Iftds help system, which is pretty amazing. So hats off to Josh there. And if you send in help desk questions and stuff, Josh is likely the one to be responding, although we all jump in too if needed. So we do our best to get back to our users as quickly as we can if folks have questions, and we always encourage you to contact us through the ticket system if you need help for anything that's kind of beyond a password. But yeah, so we really want to make sure you guys get the help you need. So I think, Gabe's looking for that SharePoint address, I think, Jen, for those links to the exercises and stuff.
Yep, I'm on it.
Okay, cool. Okay, so let me go ahead, and I'm gonna turn off my camera because my internet's a little laggy these days. That'll help with keeping things moving here. And I'm probably gonna turn off the chat too. So Jen, if feel free to flag me down or just holler at me if I need to pick up a question. I want this to kind of be informal and sort of a discussion. So as I'm going through, if you guys have questions or want me to stop or and show you something different, or just chime in. And I've invited Caroline and Bree and Josh and Nicole to pipe up too if they need to rein me in or want to remind you guys of stuff that I maybe haven't mentioned. So I've got a lot to go over today. So I'm gonna try to do it fairly quickly, and I'm gonna jump a little bit back and forth between some PowerPoint slides because that'll make it go a little faster. And then I'll go into Iftds and actually do a little demo for you on the compare weather part. so let me go ahead and get my screen squared away here. I'm going to share the PowerPoint. This is going to take me a second to get it to look the way I want it to. Okay, so you guys probably are seeing a bit of a mess of screen stuff. Let me try this here. Okay, I don't want...
Got it, got it.
You got it? Okay. You are seeing, let me get back to this. Sorry, I was jumping around a little on my presentation. Let me go back to the very beginning. Okay. Are you seeing? Come on now. Are you seeing, you're seeing the slide that says areas of concern, I bet?
Right now, spatial modeling for prescribed fire and fuels planning.
Oh, excellent. That's what I want you to see. Is it in presentation mode or is it just?
No, we're seeing your IFTDS in the background. So it looks like we're seeing your desktop screen, not the PowerPoint itself.
All right. That's what I figured.
If you select the, when you're trying to present, select that box on the right that says pick one. And there you go. And we can just see only the PowerPoint versus all the other stuff. But if you're going to bump back and forth, Kim, this will work.
Yeah. Okay. So you are, tell me, you're seeing, okay. It's not in presentation mode yet though, is it?
Nope.
I got this figured out earlier. Okay.
There you go.
Now it is? Okay.
Yep. You're in present mode.
Oh, sweet. Okay. I love it when it works eventually. Okay. All right. So let's try this. Okay. I'm obviously not an expert at this Teams thing. So, okay, so let's just get rolling. So the things I'm going to focus on today are how to use IFTDS for your burn plan. Now, we don't actually have like a burn plan function in IFTDS where you go in and you click, I want to write a burn plan. But we have a ton of stuff already available in IFTDS that you can use in your burn plan or help inform your burn plan. And that's kind of what I'm going to show you today. So I think of it as there's 4 different elements to me, maybe 5, that I think IFTDS can really help with in a burn plan. And it's the description of the fire area, the actual prescription, and the holding and contingency parts of the plan. And then also the organization and equipment, and I'm going to show you why these are all kind of related. So those are the ones I'm going to focus on. But before I do that, I want to point these things out. Like I said, if you haven't used IFTDS, I asked that question, how many people have used IFTDS? And before I turned off the chat, I think I saw about 17 or so thumbs up on that one. So it sounds like, I think we've got about 100 folks on the call today. And my guess is, so at least 20, and maybe there's a few more out there of you who all have actually used IFTDS and or at least have played around with it. So if you want to learn more about it, we've got a couple things. So the Wildland Fire Learning Portal, we've got an IFTDS overview class that's a really great introduction. And it walks you through all the major parts of IFTDS and then gives you a few little quizzes along the way so you can kind of check yourself as you go. That's going to be updated. Josh is releasing a new version of that starting Monday. So that'll be out Monday, the newest version of it. And we encourage you to go and try that out. Give us feedback on it if you'd like. And then in the process, that's in process right now, is we're building a how to use IFTDS for your prescribed fire plan. So that's going to be a thing as well coming up probably in the next, I'm going to say 6 weeks or so is when I hope to have at least a draft, a good working draft where we can get some folks to test it for us. And a lot of it's going to be based on the content today. There's also a lot of other great little mini courses that are self-register on the portal. And I encourage you guys to check these out. And I put those on here as well. So these are other modules that other people have made that could help you with some of this modeling and burn plan writing and such. Okay, so the Help Center in IFTDS is a great resource. If you get stuck on things, you can use the little question marks in the application and definitely look at the tutorials, the webinars. We've got a ton of recorded stuff in there, and encourage you to go to the Help Center whenever you have questions. Okay, So our agenda today, I want to go over a few thoughts on using spatial modeling for burn plans, and then I'm going to go over those different elements that I mentioned just a minute ago. So element 4, the description of the fire area, the prescription. We'll have some time for discussion, and then I really want to get to the holding, contingency, and organization if we have time. So hopefully we can whiz through this and get there. Okay, so the big question is, why should I use spatial modeling for prescribed fire planning? Well, we use behave, right? We've all been brought up and taught behave. That's what we teach in the Burn Boss classes. We've taught behave for a very long time. But it is 2021 after all, and we do have these really great spatial tools to look at our fire behavior and look at our maps. And I think we should really be using those tools now that we have them available, and they're very easy to learn. It is, quote, the best available science that we've got out there, and so I think we should use them and leverage them for writing better burn plans. And the second thing is, a picture really is worth 1,000 words, right? A lot of the burn plans I look at and review and have over the years, you know, it's a lot of text, and I'll show you some examples. But if we just could insert some maps, some pictures, some graphs, I think we can tell our story a lot better and actually learn a little bit more about what we're about to light on fire if we do some of this with pictures and some of this spatial modeling where we actually get to see the fire behavior on the map. And of course, I always want to mention we should always be lifelong learners, right, in fire. And so learning these tools and applying them to our job, I think we should really stick to what Paul Gleason taught us and be students of fire. So there's a whole bunch of stuff on escaped prescribed fires. And this was a Two More Chains article that was done back in 2012, but to me it's super relevant even now. And the big question, of course, is, did we learn anything from all these reviews? And yes, I think we did learn a whole bunch of stuff, and we continue to, is that we need to write better burn plans. And in order to write better burn plans, we need to start using some of these tools. You can see a lot of the issues that come up in these escape prescribed fire reviews have to do with, I put some of the bullets here, have to do with our ignition holding contingency plans, our fire behavior calculations, our fuel models and picking the right fuel model, and just incorporating that knowledge both of fuels and weather and topography inside of our unit, and more importantly, outside of our burn unit. So I think these spatial models really help us fix some of these issues that do come up in these reviews. So this is a great issue. If you guys want to go back and take a look at that, it's available at that link there. You can always go take a look. So what I'm going to do, the examples I put on the SharePoint site have to do with this CIRUS prescribed fire plan. And so again, this was adapted from some exercises that we used in the Burn Boss class that we did in December here in the Great Basin. And so the examples I'm going to show you and the exercises follow along with kind of this burn plan. Like I said, it's been changed a little bit and updated to sort of match the exercises. So it's definitely not, it's a real burn plan, but it was definitely kind of modified for this. So these are some pictures from the burn unit, and you can see we've got a lot of juniper, a lot of shrub, mixed grass. I used this one because we basically tuned it down to 2 fuel models. So it made it a little more simple, I guess, to demonstrate some of this stuff with IFTDS. Of course, if you have a much more complex burn unit, then the spatial modeling will be a little more involved. But this one's just a 2 model example to kind of keep things fairly streamlined. So you can see this burn unit is north of Redmond in Central Oregon on the Crooked River grasslands. And anyway, it's the red dot there in the middle of the map. So that's, you can just to get a general idea of where we are in the world. This is the actual burn unit itself. So it's about a little over 1,000 acres. And again, this is the Google Earth image that you can see, kind of, like I said, mix of grass and shrub. And then there's some values that they've pointed out in here that we'll talk about a little later on. We've got an aspen stand, we've got an orchard, there's some research plots. This area was burned in 2013 to the south end. We've got a house up here in the upper left corner, and notice the kind of the fuels and such that surround the unit and are within the unit, because we're going to talk a lot about that. Okay, so this is sort of the general map of the vicinity. So the objectives on this burn primarily are to reduce the juniper and increase grasses, shrubs, or small shrubs and forbs, but get rid of some of the big juniper is the idea, and kind of build a bit of a mosaic. So we're going to keep the objectives fairly simple, like I said, as we talk through this example and how to use IFTDS to look at some of the outputs. So keep that objective in mind, both reducing the 1 and 10 hour fuels and then the mortality in the juniper. Okay, so the exercise that, like I said, if you want to kind of follow along, feel free to. This is going to be the part 1, and we're basically doing our landscape evaluation. We're going to look and see what's on the map, and then see how this is going to apply to element 4, which is the description of the fire area. That's what I want to focus on for this piece. Okay, how am I doing, Jen? Any questions so far? Are we good?
Nope, we're good. I
Okay.
did bump over though. I'm running your PowerPoint right now because we kept getting kicked out from yours. So.
Oh shoot! Really?
I hope I'm following along just fine, and we'll make it work, Kim. That way you can see what you need to see and just holler when you need to bump out to the IFTDS. Okay.
Do you want me to try to share it again?
No, we're good. We're moving forward and it's working so far, I think.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm gonna keep. So sorry about that. Yeah. See, my internet's a little goofy. Okay. So element 4, description of the fire area. So, I think about this part of the plan as where I really learn what's on the landscape and then what I'm going to care about. So IFTDS can help you do that. And that's where I want to walk through these slides here. And again, think of the picture's worth 1,000 words kind of deal. And in IFTDS, we can use the maps. We can use the graphs and the reports from IFTDS also to really help beef up this part of your plan. So this next slide is a bunch of text. So yeah, if you go to the next one, Jen, thanks. And this is what we often see in burn plans, right? There's a ton of text, and which is fine. I mean, we need to describe things, right? But I think we can take some of these and add in some of these outputs from IFTDS to help tell a better story. So this is the landscape in IFTDS for this burn unit. And briefly, I just wanted to talk about editing landscapes and what you see in IFTDS. And I didn't want to, this is in the exercise, so you could actually learn how to do this through the exercise. But in this screenshot, this is the actual text from the burn plan. It talks about the heavy shrub and juniper, the stands of bitterbrush, rabbit brush, different shrub models. The 2014 land fire data, if you grab that data, we also have the 2016 data in there, but this burn plan was written back in 2013. So I used the land fire data from 2014 to be a little closer. But I don't like the way it represents the shrubs, right? There's a lot of grass here. So this is a report output. This is a graph that you get from the IFTDS reports that shows the grass models and then these grass shrub models. Well, what's missing in here would be the juniper stuff, right? That's not really represented in a GS1 or GS2. So what we need to do is edit our landscape, and you can do that in IFTDS. And it's always important when you're using IFTDS to look at your fuel models from land fire and make sure they represent what's actually on your map. So in this case, I went in and said, okay, I need more shrub in here. So that's what we're going to do in IFTDS, and that's this next screen on how to edit your landscape. So we have this tool in IFTDS that allows us to say, take all my grass shrub models and change them to a regular shrub model. So in this case, it's going from a GS1 and to an SH5 is basically what we're doing. So you can see it might be hard to read, it's small, but like I said, it's in the exercise. So we're changing a 122 to a 145, and this is the tool we use in IFTDS. You grab your landscape, you write your rule, changing one fuel model to another. You name your new landscape, and that's what we're going to work with for the rest of this example. So in this case, on the left, we have the original fuel models, and then I made the change to add in the 145, the shrub model, which is what you see on the right. So this is our landscape that we're now going to work with all the fire behavior that we want to use for this description of the fire area and for the rest of our fire behavior, like for our prescription and stuff. So you can make these changes directly in IFTDS, and now you're sort of ready to go when it comes to the rest of your burn plan. Okay, so and this is why it's important. So the next shot is of the fire behavior output. So in IFTDS, once you change your fuel model, now we're going to run some fire behavior, and I'm going to show you how to do this actually. So this is just sort of prep you for what's coming. On the left, if we didn't change our fuel model, then we'd have a lot of flame lengths that are sort of in the 0 to 1 foot range, which obviously does not reflect a really tall juniper, what we'd get from fire behavior there. So by changing that fuel model to a shrub 5, the 145, you can see we change our fire behavior, and now we get these flame lengths in the 8 to 11 foot range, which would be much more reflective of what we'd expect to see in this type of fuel setting. So that's why we want to always check our fuel models, and then we can kind of check the fire behavior that's going to go with those fuel models to make sure it matches sort of what we envisioned seeing on that landscape. Okay, so next slide. These are just some outputs from the reports that you can get from IFTDS that you can use in that element 4. So once we change our fuel models and we're happy with them, we can get a breakdown of the fuels just within the burn unit, so just within that polygon, or we can get a breakdown of the fuels on the whole landscape. And it depends on what you're trying to tell in your burn plan, but either one of those might be important. So those are a few different outputs we get from the IFTDS reports that can end up in your burn plan. This is the slope. There's a slope output. We get all the elements of a landscape. So we get fuel model, slope. That might be important. It's not that important in this particular burn unit, but in another burn unit, slope might be really important. So you might want to show that. Elevation, same thing. Don't have a ton of elevation gradient in this burn unit, but a different unit that you're doing might be, that might be a very important piece. So then, this is sort of my take-home message, of course, is where these things are relevant, go ahead and put them in your burn plan. So in element 4, this is our description, right? We've got some good, good write-up of what's in here. But by adding a few simple pictures and then maybe the screen capture of the fuel models and a graph, you very quickly explain what's happening on the landscape by just using a few of these outputs from IFTDS. Rather than just having a page of text, now you've got the pictures to tell the rest of the story. If you're sitting down with a line officer and you're trying to, represent your burn plan and get some signatures, having these immediately handy is great. A lot of times we stuff these things in the appendix, and that's fine. Sometimes we need to do that. But if there's a few key things that help tell you the story, bring them out and put them in the body of your burn document and use them to help beef up all that text. So I'm going to say that over and over again during this presentation, but I really do think some of these outputs help with this element quite a bit. So that's element 4. Here's another example. This was a different burn unit. This is actually down in South Florida, but in this case, this big table of the burn unit and all of the fuel models was used. And I said, well, that's nice, but if we just stuck a map in there and then show the breakdown of the fuel models, again, that bottom graph is an output from the IFTDS reports. To me, that tells a much better story than me trying to read through all of this table of fuel models. So that's kind of what I'm getting at. Just another example for you. Okay, so let me stop there and see if anyone has any questions or thoughts, because I want to jump to IFTDS and go through some of the stuff with the prescription. So anything, Jen, so far? Are we good? You out there, Jen?
Yep, no, we're good so far. You hit on the appendix picture, and I'd have to echo, making the corrections and showing pictures of where the veg slope and elevation or all that changes. That impacts your firing operation, especially with your, your direction of where you're going to hold, have potential escapes, and then, you might need to modify your stripping patterns. So those are really good examples.
Awesome. Okay, so go to the next one. I want to do a quick, this is sort of like a 101 of spatial modeling, because I know some people might be really new to this. So the stuff I'm about to show you in IFTDS is the spatial part. So I think of the way we learn fire behavior and modeling is the crawl, walk, run idea, right? We used to teach nomograms in S390, which we actually don't teach those anymore, which makes me a little sad because I actually like nomograms. And then we have behave, right? That's part 2.
I haven't either, but I just thought, well, I'll listen to it. But it sounds like
I think someone needs to mute their mic. So behave is basically nomograms in a computer, right? So when we drew these nomograms, if some of you guys remember, depending on your inputs, the size of your box changes, right? If it gets bigger, that means your output number gets bigger. So, for these wind speeds for short grass, we start with our fuel moistures, we run around our nomogram, and we get an output for our different fire behavior, rates of spread and flame lengths. So what we did is we took those and we put them in a computer and we made behave, and that's what's in the middle here. So that's the numbers part of fire behavior modeling. And then the third part is IFTDS, right? So we basically took behave, at least for the landscape fire behavior model that's in IFTDS, and that's the top picture. We took behave and we basically put it on a map. So anytime we have a pixel of a fuel model on the map, now we have a fire behavior output to go with it. So that's what we're seeing in the top image here with IFTDS. So it's basically a spatial representation of what you see in behave. The second model that's in IFTDS is a spread model, and it's a lot more complex, and it's something that if you get into this stuff a little bit more, you probably want to do some homework, maybe phone a friend. It's a more advanced model, and it's something you probably need to learn a little bit more about the assumptions on how the model works and stuff. I'm going to show you how it works and how it can be used, but I really do encourage you to learn a little bit more if you're going to start using some of these more advanced models. I think using the landscape fire behavior model that's in IFTDS is perfectly fine. Like I said, it's more of a representation of behave as it shows up on a map. Okay, so I just wanted to say that. So this is in IFTDS. These are the models that we actually have. So I'm going to jump right into this example, and the things we've already done. I've already uploaded a shapefile. I've already created a landscape. We looked at that landscape just a few minutes ago at the different fuel model outputs. I've adjusted the fuels. So now I'm ready to jump in and actually run some fire behavior. Okay, so that's where we're at. So the next slide is the actual prescription parameters. And okay, this is so exercise 2 is now the exercise that I'm going to be using as I walk through some of these examples. So the last little bit I did on element 4 was exercise 1. And now this is the information in exercise 2 that's on the SharePoint site. So what I'm doing is I'm pulling the prescription parameters out of the burn plan, and we're going to use these to run our prescription in IFTDS. So you can see we've got a low, we have a desired, and we have a high end of our prescription, right? That's pretty typical. You might have something different depending on what you're up to, but for this example, we've got 3 that we're going to work from. I'm going to start with the desired, which is in the kind of right down the middle, and show you the outputs, and then we'll work on the other 3, and I'm going to show you how to compare them. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hop over to IFTDS. Hopefully this works. Okay, so let me jump to.
And Kim, go ahead and then press that the share content when you're hopping over on your side.
Okay,
I backed out of mine.
Oh, you did? Okay, whoops. Okay, yep. So you should be now seeing.
Yep, we got you.
Okay, are you in the? Okay, great. All right. So what I want to do, real quick though, is let me see if I can do this. Oops. No,
While you're doing that,
yeah,
Kim, there's a question in the chat box, maybe to your team, in terms of access to IFTDS for like a group, so the forest can see what's going on.
So you mean like everybody looking at the same project at the same time? I'm guessing that's the question.
Yeah, like a forest-based user group instead of individual profiles.
Yeah, we're not quite there yet. I'm sad to say that we haven't. It's on our list. Like a collaboration ability is very high on our list, actually. We just haven't been able to get there yet. We have a very small development team. So the idea that you could get one, like we all could log into sort of a joint account, or I could run some models and I could share them with you, and then you could see my outputs. And we don't have that ability yet. So unfortunately, we're stuck with a one user, one-on-one kind of thing. We do have it on our list to hopefully build some sort of sharing collaboration thing in the future. So I can't give you a time frame, but we've had lots of requests for that. We know it's pretty important. So yes, keep telling us what you need, because it helps us prioritize the next set of development. And maybe with some of this infrastructure money, we'll get some more funds where we can get some more developers. That would be a big help to everything. So, okay, so good question though. So what I want to do is jump right into our example here, so we can get through some of the different pieces of the prescription. So like I said, I've already done a lot of the work up front. So I'm going to go straight into my workspace. IFTDS is designed so you have this workspace that stores all of your files and everything. So in this case, what I'm going to do, I have a folder that I already built for this example. I've run all this stuff already, so we're not going to have to wait for anything. So I'm going to go into my Cyrus RX folder, and the filters are really helpful, because you can see I've got a ton of files in here now. So what I want to do is start with I want to show you the landscape. So I'm going to filter on the landscape at the top left here. So it's just showing me landscapes. And I'm going to go ahead and show you this landscape that we're going to use for the fire behavior part. But while we're in here, in the workspace, you can see there's a bunch of stuff I can do. I can view it on the map. I can download it if I wanted to, say, use it in Flam Map or show it in ArcGIS if I'm a GIS person, which I'm not. But you could do that. You can request a report, and that's something that's where I got the reports. And actually, maybe I'll show you a report real quick before I go too much further. So this is where you generate the reports. So in this case, I get a landscape report, and that's where I get those charts and graphs of the fuel model breakdowns and the images of the actual unit in a report format. You can also generate it just for that area of interest, which is just that polygon for your burn unit boundary. And in this case, I would pick burn unit boundary, and then my report would be just for the stuff within the boundary. Or you can not do that, and then you'll get a report for the whole square, the big landscape. So that's where you do a report, is directly within the workspace. So actually, let's just really quick, let me show you a report just so you can see. This is the fuel model report, just so you can kind of see what that looks like as if you were to generate one. So again, I had made this earlier. So in this case, you can see these are all the, this is the landscape. So this is the big square. And then you can see these are all the graphs. And again, this is before I made those fuel model changes. So if you wanted to show before and after, you could run these two reports, and then you get the data if you want to make your own graphs, and then it walks down through all the different pieces of the landscape. So that's what a report looks like. You can download up here if you want to save it as a JPEG, each of these images. You can download the whole report as a PDF. So there's a whole bunch of stuff you can get from outputs from these. So if you wanted to use this graph in your element 4, you could click on this and you can see download a JPEG, a PDF, or a PNG image. And then you could stick that into your element 4 in your actual burn plan. Okay, so let me go back to the fire behavior. Okay, so that's reports. So I'm going to go back to my landscape again, and I'm going to go ahead and view it on the map and show you, just so we can get a quick view of the map studio. Okay, so this is our landscape that I had already generated. We can add our burn boundary to it, so we have a little bit of context. And in this case, it's that shape that we've already seen. So that's our burn unit on the landscape of fuel models. A couple tools you can use in here. This is the identify tool. If I want to know what this fuel model is, I can click on it with this little identify tool and it tells me it's fuel model. This is the SH5, the 145. Remember, I did that change. So that's what you're seeing in here. So we've got two fuel models, like I said, pretty simple. And then the second one is the GR2, the 102. So we've got a grass and a shrub model. It basically represented, there's a few others in here as well, but those are the primary. So that's the identify tool. You can use this little swipey tool, which allows you to look at the what's underneath. So you can swipe up and down. I can change the base map to more of an image. And then I can look at this fuel model as it looks on top of the actual picture, the Google Earth image. So that's another great little tool in the Map Studio that I wanted to show you, the little swipey tool. Okay, so that's great, but now we want to run some fire behavior. So a couple ways you can do this. We're going to go to, in this case, I'm going to show you the cycle just so we start kind of at the beginning. So under landscape evaluation, we can model fire behavior. So that's this one right here. And that takes us to our playground, which is where all of our fire behavior models are kept. And this is where you get to pick them. In this case, like I said, we're probably going to focus on landscape fire behavior, which is our sort of quote, behave on the map image. Okay. And so when you do this, you choose your model, you create a run, and then you can do a couple things. You can pick your landscape. In this case, I'm just going to search for mine. I know it's called Cyrus. This is my modified landscape. You can split the map, so you can have the map on the left and then have your prescription inputs on the right. So you can do that, or you can just, for size, I'm going to just go back to the full screen so we can see it better. And then we're going to add our prescription parameters. So remember I said we're going to start with our desired prescription parameters in here. And unlike behave, you can only, you're going to do basically one run at a time. So of course it's going to represent all of your fuel models, but you can't put a range of things in. So you can only put in, so if I want a, let's see, so our desired prescription here is a 7-mile-an-hour wind, and I'm just going to use straight out of the west. So I'm going to use 270. Crown fire, I'm just going to leave that as a default. Right now it's using the Scott and Reinhardt model, but you can, if you don't know anything about that and you want to learn about it, you can click on the little question mark and that'll pop up a little explanation. And then if you need further information, you can click on the link there and it'll take you to the help center, and then you can read about these different inputs. So I'm going to whiz through this pretty quick just for the sake of time. Our initial fuel moistures for our desired part of our prescription are going to be 7, 10, and 13. And then we've got live fuel moistures because of the fuel models that we're using. So we need to put live fuel moistures in here. So we're going to use 100 and 120. Okay, and that's our fuel moisture set. And then you can also do fuel moisture conditioning, which again, for simplification, I'm not going to go through this today, but if you want to read about that and why it's important, you can go ahead and use the help center and click on that question mark and get a little help on fuel moisture conditioning. So then I would give my run a name. And so this is my desired. So I've already named this and I've already ran this. So in this case, I would name it, Cyrus 2014 desired. Okay, and I'd hit save. So what I'm going to do is I've already done that ahead of time. So I'm going to go back to my workspace. Okay, and then I'm going to run it. And it's going to show up in my workspace, and it'll be chinking along as it's running. You can click this button, which is the status button, and that'll give you it only takes a couple minutes to run these. So if it's a small landscape. So I've already run them. So this is like the Julia Childs thing where I've already cooked the lasagna and I'm taking it out now. And I'm going to show you what it looks like because we already cooked it.
Hey, Kim, we got muted somehow.
Okay, is that better? I'm sorry.
Yep. Nope, that's fine. Got you back.
My computer's like just doing its own thing today.
Yeah.
I swear I didn't click it. Okay, so so these are the different things you can do with that model output. We can view it on the map, we can download it, we can request a report. And so same things we did with the landscape. So I'm going to go ahead and view it on the map. Okay, so it's cooking. Here we go. We're going to look at, it's going to default to flame length. And while that's drawing, I'm going to go ahead and bring up my burn unit boundary so we can get a little context here. Okay, so there's our burn. Now we have flame lengths. So we just ran our desired prescription. I can take my identify tool. I'm going to focus on this north end of the burn unit because two reasons. There is quite a bit of shrub and stuff along this line, and there's a house that sits right up here. So we're going to talk a lot about that. So I'm going to click on here, and flame lengths here are about 9 or 10 feet under our desired prescription. And then the green, remember, we only have 2 fuel models here, so we really only have kind of 2 outputs. This one's about 1/2 foot, so that's our flame length. Our rate of spread, you can see, is a little over a chain an hour in the grass, and rate of spread is about 25 chains an hour in the shrub. So again, I'm looking at that on the identify, but you can also just turn those layers on and off. So there's flame length. Here's rate of spread. Again, we can click on these and get the parameters. You can do fire line intensity. So these are the different outputs. And again, it's just 2 fuel models, so it's not showing a ton of variability. Okay, so that's our first run. That's our desired part of our prescription. Now we've got the low end and the high end, right? And what we really want to do is compare them all. So I'm going to go into our cycle again, and I'm going to show you how to do the comparison part. Now, the idea of the comparison module, it's under strategic planning, and it's called compare weather. The key here is you need to run all of your models first. So I've run desired, okay? You could go into your workspace and go back to that model run, and you could you could go into your playground, I apologize. You can go into your model run, desired, and click copy. And in that case, it's just going to copy your desired run. Then you can go in and change your fuel moistures and your wind speeds to, say, the low end of your prescription. And so you'll change these numbers to the low end, name it, and hit save. Be sure you put low in the name because that'll help you find it. Then you can go back, you can run that model, okay? Then you could go back to the playground, and then you could, again, come back here, change it to the high end of your prescription, save that one, give it a name, preferably put high in the name. So then you'll have low, you'll have desired, and you'll have high. So you'll have 3 basic runs that you've done that you can now look at in the comparison module. So if we go back to my folder, just to show you, you can see in here the top 3, I have low, I have desired, and I have high. I've already run them. So now when I go to the cycle and go to my strategic planning piece, I can go to compare weather. And this is where I'm going to look at them all next to each other. So I'm going to look at landscape fire behavior. And I'm going to look at this is where I pick my landscape. So I'm going to pick and this is the one I want to start with. So I want to start with Cyrus. I want to start with low. I have a bunch of other stuff in here, but the 3 I want to look at, you can do up to 5, but the 3 I want to look at are low, desired, and high. So in order to look at them kind of in order, if I pick low, that'll be the first one that shows up. Okay, so that's low, the low end. Now the other 2 I want to look at are desired. So I'm going to check that checkbox, and then I want to look at high. So now I've got low, desired, and high all next to each other. In this case, I'm looking at flame length, and I'd like to turn on my burn unit boundary so I have some spatial context here. Okay, so this should look very familiar, but now I'm looking at all 3 of them together. And then you can see the table below shows you the inputs. So I've got the wind speeds. I used 2 on the low, 6 on the desired, and 10 on the high. And I've got my fuel moistures that I used for each scenario. Okay, so I varied the wind and I varied the fuel moistures. So that's sort of a snapshot. And then I want to look at them on the map, because I might want to, now I really want to dig into this stuff. Okay, so now I can flip to click on the map. And now I'm looking at, in this case, I've got high. I could switch it to low, and I could switch it to desired. Okay, I could switch my to rate of spread if I wanted to look at that rather than flame length. I could use my little swipey tool and check out my, my images below. So if we want to look at where that house is, okay, so here's the house. It's sitting up right here in this kind of upper left area. You can see the white dot. And now I can scroll this is my desired prescription. I can see my flame lengths. Oh, sorry, this is rate of spread, and see where that is in relation to the house. So like I said, this north end of the burn unit is kind of a critical area because I've got a house up here. I could use the measure tool, which is this little green tool, and I could say, well, how far away is that house? Well, it's about a little over half a mile, 0.68 miles. So, okay, so that helps me. Now I can start making some decisions about other parts of my plan, my contingency, my holding resources, things like that. So this is the compare weather part where I can look at these. Now I can look at, here's the high end of my prescription, and I can see what my fuel models are around that house again. This is rate of spread. Let me look at flame length. What's my flame length around that house? I could use the identify tool. I can click right by that house and say, well, that's about 13-foot flame length. So there's, on the high end of my prescription, this is what I'm going to get out of those shrubs. So, depending on your wind and all that. Me as a burn boss, I'm thinking about, inside the burn unit's important. I want to meet my objectives of my burn but I also need to deal with what happens if it gets out. So, you can use IFTDS for all of those things. Will I meet my objectives within my burn unit? Remember, we wanted to reduce the shrub within the burn unit. So these higher flame lengths, looks like I might be able to do that. So compare weather can really help you illustrate those different things. So that's what I wanted to show you in IFTDS. I'm going to whip through a couple more slides just to get in one more piece of this when it comes to the contingency. I'm going to skip ahead. So Jen, maybe I'll have you, let's just stop. Does anyone have any questions or thoughts on this? And I can hit the last couple slides there at the end on the contingency and holding. I think you kind of get the idea, but I wanted to see what you guys think about using this in your burn plans now that you can kind of see this landscape fire behavior on the map and how it relates.
So Kim, while other folks are figuring out what they want to discuss, John had a good point in terms of, can he model or bounce back and forth between backing, flanking, and head fire? Or is the fire behavior component only anticipating head fire? Because the human component of stripping is a function.
That is a great question. And I'm glad you asked that. So right now in IFTDS, Behave can do that, right? You can tell it to show me backing, flanking, heading. In IFTDS right now, we can only, this is head fire. We're only looking at head fire in IFTDS in this spatial version. So when you click on the pixel here and you get a flame length, that's a head fire flame length. We hope in time to be able to incorporate some of those things from Behave. This is why both Behave and IFTDS are still very important. I mean, I'm not trying to say that IFTDS replaces Behave at all, because there's a lot of great functionality in Behave that we don't have in IFTDS. So yes, that's a great question. And the answer right now is no, you're only going to get head fire in IFTDS. So,
and Kim, if I remember, I mean, you can always put, and I used to always put a little side note there at the end of the prescription that what it was using to do the fire behavior, right? For those different things. So if you're planning on showing or demonstrating worst case or head fire scenarios,
right,
when it escapes, then that's, you just put the little asterisks at the bottom of the fire behavior prescription, indicating your assumptions that you factored into your prescription window.
Right, right. That's a very good point. Yes.
You know, and that you're expecting maybe less because you're going to be doing, you know, modified flanking or backing fire.
Exactly. Exactly. So, right. So use these tools. You know, you might want to get the numbers from Behave for those flanking and, you know, and backing numbers, because that's what you're going to use to meet your objective. You know, but yeah, like you said, you might, you know, if there's a worst case kind of scenario you want to illustrate, or maybe you need that head fire for the shrub, you know, in order to reduce the juniper, you know. So yeah, that's the nuance of writing the prescription, right? Is using these different tools to sort of illustrate how you're going to meet those objectives. So it's a great question. And I hope in time we'll be able to click on a pixel and show flanking and backing fire behavior in IFTDS. And like I said, if we can get some more development money, hopefully we'll be able to do that, because I do think it's an important piece of this.
So we've got about 5 minutes left in the formal hour.
Yep.
I did put in the chat box, Kim, that I plan on letting you run through all the agenda items.
Okay.
You need to run a little long.
Sure.
And people can catch up on the recording. But so maybe right now is a great time if folks have a burning question or comments or feedback, you know, your input is critical to the improvement or the future development of IFTDS. And so you got the whole team here, guys. So don't hesitate to speak up.
Yeah, and if you're playing around with these exercises that I've given you, you know, I'd love to hear, you know, this is, of course, this is the Central Oregon burn plan, but as you're doing those exercises, think about your own burn plans, and give us some feedback. You know, like sometimes the exercises help you go, oh, I hadn't thought about that for my burn plan. And then if you have questions and stuff, please let us know. Hit us up, send me an email. You know, maybe we can get a little chat thing going on. I'm a DOI employee, but I can get up on the Forest Service team. So yeah, we're happy. We want to hear kind of how you guys might use this stuff.
Okay, I'm going to give it an obligatory 7-second pause here.
That's right.
Let Kim power on.
Okay, and I'm going to try to go back to my my PowerPoint. Am I still sharing, Jen? I'm not.
No, because I pulled your PowerPoint right.
Did you take it back? Okay, that's
Yep.
cool. Okay. Well,
power on.
Yeah, and feel free, you guys, to throw questions as we go here. What I want to do next is talk a little bit about the rest of these elements. We talked about the description of fire area, element 4. We've talked about the prescription. Now I want to talk a little bit about element 11, 16, and 17, which is organization, equipment, holding, and contingency. Because you can see from these spatial models, they actually could inform some of these pieces quite a bit. So go ahead to the next slide, Jen. The one that shows the exercise. Yeah, so there is a part 3 to the exercise, and that is going to go through how to use the minimum travel time model, which I said is the more advanced model. And I'm going to say it again, if you're not familiar with that, I really encourage you to do your homework before you just start using it. I mean, certainly learn it and play with it, but before you actually use it in a real burn plan or a real project, you should probably have some street cred with it first. So if you're new to it, you might want to phone a friend, call one of your LTAN or FBAN buddies that does, you know, some of the spatial modeling, and maybe have them help you or walk you through using that model. I just want to encourage that extra kind of education, if you will, when using that. But I do have an exercise on it, so it'd be great if you want to walk through it and see how it works, which is what we want you to do. So, okay, so the next piece, go ahead in the next slide. So I want to talk about holding, organization, equipment, and contingency. And the reason I put them in this order is because a lot of people, when they write their organization and what equipment they need, they do, it's element 11, right? To me, it should be after holding, because how do you know what you need until you kind of know what your holding plan is going to look like, right? So I like to think of them in this order. So go ahead to the next one, Jen. And let's talk about the holding plan, right? So in IFTDS, I think the holding plan, where you want to show critical holding areas, IFTDS is great for this, because it really visualizes the spatial layout, and then where are the red pixels? You know, where's the high rates of spread? Where's the high flame lengths? I can really show that on a map. And that can really be helpful when you're designing this section of your plan. So go ahead to the next one. So in this, we've got, back to our Cyrus unit, we've got 3 areas. The first one is the top right. And again, that's that area between the burn unit and the house, right? We talked about it's about 0.6 miles, but it's got this continuous fuel bed right between it. It's got all those shrubs. So if you're burning with a southeast wind, you know, it's like, okay, that could be a holding concern for me. The image on the left, the one that zoomed out a little bit more and has the arrow going down towards the river here, that's another stretch. It's about 4 miles, but it's another stretch of continuous fuels, you know, depending on what wind you're burning out of. You know, there's some structures down here by the river. And God knows we've seen some crazy fire behavior these days. So 4 miles isn't that far an area anymore. It seems like it used to be, but it's not anymore when it comes to a fire getting out of hand. So, so when we come to these critical values, whether they're outside of the unit, the last picture is the stuff that's inside of the unit. So if you want to look at what flame lengths, if you're needing to protect, for example, we have this orchard, which is in the kind of the top center of the north line, maybe that needs to be protected. Well, what kind of flame lengths can I expect there? So go ahead to the next slide, Jen, and we'll basically look at the fire behavior as it applies to some of those things I was just showing you. So in IFTDS, the outputs for flame length, looking at that area between the bottom of the burn unit and the structures by the river, this is flame length. This is the desired end of our prescription. You can see our flame lengths are between, you know, 8 and 11, 11 to 25 in the orange areas. The high end of the prescription, it gets even, you know, higher flame lengths, which you might need to meet your objective, but would cause a problem if it escapes. So this is how I think IFTDS can do a great job of illustrating that. If you're sitting down with a line officer and just trying to talk through getting signatures and how you're going to handle this stuff, you know, putting this in your burn plan would be great. You know, the pieces that you need to tell your story. So go to the next one. The interior values, again, if you're trying to protect, the little squares are those values within the unit. If you're trying to protect and you know, you don't want to burn up the orchard or the aspen stand, you know, what kind of flame lengths, again, can you expect? Maybe you need to talk to your resource specialists and sort of show them. And this is the mitigation we're going to do in order to not burn up the orchard. Under our desired prescription, this is what we might get, you know, under a high end of our prescription. So you can plan your holding resources, right, based on some of these outputs. So the next one is an example of a holding plan and where you might take this image and stick it in your plan. So under element 16, you know, under different winds scenarios, these are the areas that you might have a concern with when it comes to holding, those critical holding areas. And to me, this picture really tells the story. Rather than writing a paragraph trying to explain this, just stick the picture in and you can point those things out on the map. Then when it comes to element 11, which is the next slide, and you're trying to decide, well, how much stuff do I need in order to hold this burn and maybe protect those values? Now you can look at those rates of spread, those flame lengths, the distance to those values. And granted, you're going to do this out in the field, of course, because you're going to know your burn unit, you know, intimately from walking around in the woods. But this way you can really use the pictures to illustrate what you know in your mind. So I think of it more as a communication tool than anything. And it's probably going to maybe just affirm what you already know. But when you're trying to, you know, get buy-in for these things, these pictures really help. So that's why I think if you do this and then think about your organization, it's a little better order to do it in. So then go to the contingency planning, which is the last section, and the same thing. So what contingency planning is determining what other stuff, what additional stuff and actions I'm going to need in order to keep the prescribed fire within the scope of the plan, right? So contingencies planning is if my holding plan doesn't quite work out and I need some extra help, what is that going to look like? So by using this example of the house, that's off to the north of the burn unit, I can use our minimum travel time model in IFTDS, which again, this is the exercise 3 if you want to walk through that yourself. So go to the next slide. And the minimum travel time model in IFTDS actually shows fire spread under certain weather conditions. So in this case, that house is about 0.6 miles. And in one burn period under our desired fire behavior in our prescription, you can see the spot fire. If there was a spot fire on the north end of the unit, it might spread close to that house in one burn period. So that's a good way to think about it. Well, if I get a spot, you know, how am I going to deal with that? What kind of resources do I need? So go to the next one, Jen, and then this is the comparison. And again, the same compare model that I showed you, the compare weather, you can do that with our minimum travel time model as well. So you can see a spot fire under low conditions, under desired, and then under our high prescription parameters. So hopefully that comparison, you know, looking at these things, I put each screen capture on here just to make it easier to look at on the slide, but you can do this in IFTDS and then toggle those on and off to kind of go back and forth and really look at what you've got. Then you can go back and rerun your prescription numbers too. And maybe you want to modify, you know, that high end a little bit. And then the last slide here is the actually putting that information into your burn plan. So once again, illustrating this actually in the document for this key area that's important to you. And there might be other parts of the, you know, the burn unit that are also important, but you know, maybe this is the one you're trying to show the example of. You know, you could stick this right in your burn plan, show that critical holding area, and then show the contingency plan and how you plan on dealing with that when it comes to resources. So that's sort of how I think of holding, organization, equipment, and contingency is kind of a package deal, I guess. And I think IFTDS does a pretty good job showing those things on the map. You know, Behave also does the contain module, which we use a lot, which is great. I mean, there's no reason not to use that. It might help support some of these things that you're learning by looking at it spatially as well. So the last part, again, is learning more about this spatial model stuff. There's several publications out there. Rick Stratton's done one. Joe Scott's got 1 or 2 out there. And then, like I said earlier, is the phone a friend thing. You know, there's a lot of LTANs, FBANs, fire behavior folks that have experience running some of these more advanced models. And if you've got a much more complex burn unit, you might want to think about some of these other models. You know, this was a pretty simple example, although it's still useful even for a simple example, but definitely if you're going to get into a more landscape level size burn, you might want to incorporate some more of this modeling and get a little help to do that. So that was what I wanted to cover. And I know I whizzed through that really, really fast. But hopefully that gives you a pretty broad overview. And then with the examples and the exercises to play with on your own time, like I said, all of this stuff is posted in the SharePoint. So, you know, play around with it, check it out. If you've got questions, hit us up. And maybe we can, if we want to do a follow-up to this session, we could do that later on. But that's pretty much what I had for today, Jen. I know I went a little long. But like I said, there's a ton to cover, and there's a lot more to it even than just what I showed you today.
Yeah, no, Kim, I think you're seeing really good feedback for your session in terms of maybe enlightening some folks and tools they haven't had a chance to discover or utilize, and then maybe different approaches to take. So are there any questions out there that we didn't get a chance to cover, or things you might want to see in a follow-up session? Because remember, this whole point of this session and all the ones that come are to literally serve the field better in a single location. So at least on the Forest Service side. So, you know, now's a good time to either plug it, and if you're shy, then go ahead and send it to me afterwards in an email, and we can use your input for sure.
And I know Caroline hit a bunch of questions in the chat too. So thanks, Caroline, and Jen. I know you were monitoring. So I know Caroline or Bree or Josh, anybody? I know you had some questions, Caroline. You were answering. Anything that stood out to you at all, or?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, gotcha.
No, it was great to see the questions, the feedback affirms things we've been hearing for a while. And I would just encourage folks to speak up if they like this burn planning functionality and they want more, because you know, our priorities are set at the business agency level, you know, not by us. So if there's you know, enough demand, it may become higher priority in development. But as Kim said, you know, we've been working on risk assessment. We maintain FTEM. So there's decisions to be made about what's the most important and beneficial to the field that you guys should weigh in on.
So Kim, you got a question about pixels and fire behavior informing the adjacent pixels. Maybe you can describe how they are or are really not linked.
Let's see here. Right, okay, this is a good question. So it depends on which model you're using. So the landscape fire behavior model, which is just the basic one that shows rate of spread and flame length on the map, pixel by pixel, those are not influencing each other. So that's a model that's just, you know, it burns this one pixel, it burns this pixel, they don't influence each other. The minimum travel time model that shows fire spread, in that case, it is spreading across the map. So the flame length that you get in the pixel next to it, you know, it's going to show a progression. So that's why it'll show burn period 1, burn period 2, burn period 3, and it's based on the wind direction. So it's a different model. So I guess the answer is it depends on which model you're using in this case. So the MTT model shows the spread. The landscape fire behavior model just shows it pixel by pixel. Hopefully that answers your question.
I'm sure they'll speak up if it didn't. And
Yeah.
then Sean was asking kind of more like, you know, if he has to go out and modify those pixels or bring them back in. And I remember you showed us how you can modify the landscape, right? But if you change, it's not like in Iftds where we can go in and say, if this, then this. It's more like shifting entire fuel models. Or can you be maybe only in one corner you want to change the grass to a shrub because you saw the unit?
Yeah, absolutely. So in Iftds, you can actually draw a polygon and say, so we call it a mask. So that would be the help topic you'd want to look up in Iftds, is changing fuel models by using a mask. And so you could say, within this polygon, I want to change the grass to the shrub, but I don't want to change anything else within the burn unit. So yes, you can use a mask to just change a certain area, or you could just pick one fuel model and change it to another fuel model. So there are several different ways to do editing within the landscape. And it's a help topic in Iftds, and there's quite a bit of explanation in there on how to do some different types of editing. Yes, so someone asked about the burn plan writing workshop next week. So that is going to be sort of a shotgun approach to going through all of the elements of a burn plan. They split it into 2 days, and so they're not going to talk a lot about Iftds. I'm going to contribute a few things, a few handouts for folks that'll basically kind of summarize what I talked about here today. But the gist of that burn plan writing workshop next week is more of the whole burn plan. But I'll have a few things to offer as far as information. But you're right, having this recording, we'll make sure that Dustin Doan from Region 4 is the one coordinating with PFTC on that. And we'll make sure that this is available, because I think it would be great for folks maybe who couldn't attend today that are part of that might want to check this out.
So Andrea, I'm looking at your question and I'm wondering if you're thinking burn plan writing for hazard ratings, or if you're thinking like on a landscape level, your quantitative risk assessments that you guys work with. Maybe you could clarify for me your thought there.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. It's really not burn plan related, landscape assessment.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think Kim will, you've got QWRA in IFTDS
do.
now, yeah?
Yeah, we sure do. The quantitative risk assessment workflow includes the hazard part of it. So you could go through the steps in the risk assessment workflow in IFTDS and just get to that hazard part and get some of the information I think you're thinking about. So that's under our that's under the strategic planning part under model. Actually, you could do it through exposure analysis. And then there's the model burn probability. So those kind of go hand in hand.
And we can probably slate that for the fall round
Yeah.
of webinars. Because I have a sneaky suspicion with the changes in WIMS and FEMS and NFDRS version 4, a revisit to that and the tools available in IFTDS will be helpful.
Yeah, and Caroline stuck a thing in the chat there about what one of those outputs looks like. Get that hazard matrix.
Okay, thanks, Kim.
Yeah, you bet. Great question.
Anybody else out there with something burning in their brain before we kind of close out and move forward?
Yeah, like I said, let us, hit us up. You can flip me an email, or if we need to, have a follow-up. I think you're going to be hearing some more about IFTDS, but like I said, there's the workshop next week. We're going to use IFTDS again in the next version of the burn, the RX 340, 341 that's coming up in March for Region 6. There's going to be a module on IFTDS there. And then we're, like I said, we're going to be developing the how to use IFTDS for your burn plan. It'll be an online course in the learning portal. And I think it'll basically kind of take everything I talked about today and put it into an online course format. So you could do a self-study, walk through that yourself. So
Yeah.
I'm hoping that will generate some more discussion and stuff, and get maybe a little community of people sharing how they're using IFTDS or, how it's helping. I'd love to see some examples of burn plans with IFTDS outputs. I've seen some, but if you guys ever have examples of using IFTDS in your projects, whether it's a burn plan or a NEPA project, a risk assessment, we'd love to see examples. That really helps us see how the field is using this stuff. So please feel free to share. We'd like to see that.
Well, Kim, thank you for your sharing session today. I think it was a good start to the conversation.
Yeah.
We'll put the recording of the link up, and when we do get those, we'll put the Fire Learning Portal link up when that comes online. I know there's a lot of other stuff, but if you haven't had a chance to check out the Learning Portal, that's a good spot to start for self-directed learning in multiple different arenas and avenues. So again, thanks for your participation today, folks, and we'll keep powering on and keep serving your needs.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. Have a great day.